highlighting the issues that have arisen with the enormous influx of visitors that we've seen to Northumberland. Welcome, of course, they are, but visitors have brought significant pressures in a number of areas which we'll cover. And what is very important is that whilst we welcome visitors, the well-being of the residents is obviously more important because they live there. And whilst we all have to get on and make the best of our lovely countryside, we've got to remember the welfare and well-being of our residents that live there. So we'll hear about some of the issues. We'll welcome questions and points of view, and then we'll listen carefully to all of those. We'll pull this to a close at about 6:15, something like that, and we will go away and look very carefully and think about everything we've heard, and we will come up with an action plan. So thank you all very much indeed for joining. The first speaker this evening, I think, is Paul Jones.
Can I just check, Glenn, if Luke's got us live streaming yet or not, just to confirm that's the case? Don't know if Luke's on the line, just to...
yeah, we're live now.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you. What I'd like to do is just to cover a brief presentation, just to highlight what the key issues are from the County Council's feedback and perspective over the summer period, and obviously that'll then lead and hopefully lead into the discussion and the evidence gathering session that we're hoping to conduct this evening. So if I'll just get a presentation up and I'll just take you through that now.
Can I just welcome everybody that's just joined? Welcome to you all. Paul Jones is going to do the first piece, and here he is.
So I'll just get this up presenting. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
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 So as Glenn's outlined, we're going to be going through, we're on section 2 now. It's just a quick reflection. We'll then go off section 3 there. We'll then go through and review the key themes in an open discussion session with yourselves before we then go on to discuss what the next steps are and the feedback arrangements. So in terms of just setting the scene, clearly we all recognise the Northumberland coast. It is a protected landscape. It has been so since 1958, and that does carry a significant weight. It does mean that Northumberland County Council and all the other public bodies that have responsibilities in that area have a fundamental obligation to consider and ensure the conservation enhancement of the AONB in everything we do. So that includes all of our policies and decision making. So it is fundamental to the importance of the landscape. A key part of that is also the fact that there's a management plan that helps and guides, and as parish councils that operate in this area, I'm sure we'd be all well aware of the AONB management plan. So just getting into the detail as to the issues that we've experienced this summer. Certainly, as I'm sure you all be well aware, car parking and public transport have been probably the main key one. And obviously going back into March, when the lockdown was first announced nationally, the County Council closed its coastal and tourism car parks to the public. We undertook that to help reinforce the national lockdown because there were travel restrictions. You weren't meant to be going anywhere in a car other than to work and other essential journeys. So we closed the car parks to facilitate that. We then went through a process as the lockdown was eased in late May and early June, where we basically had phased reopening of those facilities. And that was following a detailed risk assessment process to make sure we were happy that they could be safely operated, and also having dialogue with local county councillors and the local parish councils where those car parks were, because they had concerns and we were just trying to work and collaborate with them to make sure that where there were local concerns, those were fully mitigated and addressed before the car parks were open. So it was key in terms of the timing of that. What we did experience, though, as you can see from the picture there in the top right-hand corner of the slide, was that there were significant displacement issues right through the summer in terms of parking behaviour. Some of that occurred whilst we were in the process of reopening car parks. Some of it occurred when the car parks were fully reopened, just purely because of the capacity issues and the sheer volume of people coming to the countryside. And this links into the issue with public transport as well. That public transport was still available right through the coastal area, albeit on a winter timetable during the period. So it was a slightly reduced timetable, but clearly there was also government advice not to use public transport where you could avoid to do that. And certainly the bus operators had significant reduced footfall. It was around about half of what they would normally expect during the summer. What we certainly experienced looking at our car park in ticket sales, and there's a table there on the slide that just shows the ones along the coastal area. The table looks at September 19 and September 20. The reason we chose September was that was the period where we had a full month's comparison, because we introduced parking charges in some of those sites midway through August 19. And what that shows, looking left to right, is that fundamentally the places such as Bamborough had significantly higher levels of car visitors coming into the car parks there compared to the same time in the previous year. So as high as 85% above the level in the previous year for the likes of Bamborough, and going down to see houses that had the most visitors, but in terms of the change between this year and last, probably the least impact at only plus 10%. What we also know from our ticket sales is that clearly July and August were busy, August being significantly the busiest month, as you would expect during the summer period. But that still maintained at quite a high level through September, but has now tailed off into into October. In terms of public toilets, we, again, as part of the lockdown arrangements, closed all public toilets, again, as part of that reinforcement exercise to encourage people to stay at home and not to come out. That we did go through a phased reopening of those as the lockdown was eased. That was quite a convoluted and complex process, because we had to look at the safety in particular of our own staff involved in the cleaning, and also members of the public in using those, to ensure that there wasn't a transmission risk. We didn't want public toilets to be effectively super spreader facilities for the virus. So we went through a detailed risk assessment process, looked at how we could change the operations of those facilities, because most of them are quite small spaces once you're inside them. So we put in place new arrangements to ensure the safe use of those facilities, which have been quite involved for us, and certainly not cheap. So we are now doing full 3 times a day rather, cleansing regime. That has significantly increased the cost of operating our network of public toilets. So it's over £500,000 worth of additional cost pressures to get those facilities open this year. I think we would also acknowledge and accept that the public toilet network in Northumberland does need some capital investment just to bring it up to a higher standard than is currently the case. And we have already approved through the council's decision-making processes a major capital programme to improve both Holy Island and Sea houses in the current financial year. So the works on both of those sites will be starting this side of Christmas. And that will not only improve those facilities significantly, but also adds into them changing places facilities, which are a fully accessible disabled toilet as part of that provision. We also have are planning a phased capital programme to refurbish the rest of our toilet network. That will likely be over a 2-year period, but we'll be prioritising the highest footfall toilets in the first year of that, and there is capital already allocated to facilitate that process. The next area of issue was littering and fly tipping, and what shown on this slide is basically the number of fly tips on the pie chart. And whilst fly tipping has risen nationally in recent years, and Northumberland's been no exception to that, last year we had a 34% increase on the year before. That has primarily been in urban areas, and within those urban areas, 2 hotspot areas in the southeast of the county. So from our perspective, whilst there is always going to be some fly tipping along the Northumberland coast and in the AONB, that hasn't been a significant issue, and it hasn't changed during this summer. What has been a significant issue, though, is just the level of litter and littering that we've experienced. Obviously with a higher footfall, you would expect additional littering on the back of that. But I think we have been experiencing very high levels of littering, and also large amounts of litter being left in and around litter bins, with litter bins overflowing. And as a result of that, we did increase and respond to that by increasing and pretty much doubling up some of our litter picking and bin emptying resources over the summer period to try and keep on top of that and keep the area looking clean and tidy. I think linked to some of that littering has been the issue of fly camping and motor caravans. And this is something that has been a growing trend in recent years, but has really come to the fore this year. And not just in Northumberland, I think this is something that has occurred during the pandemic on a national basis. So partly because obviously caravan and campsites have been fully booked over the summer period. A lot of campsites and caravan sites have also only been taking bookings from people that were self-contained because they didn't have their own toilet facilities operational. And that has resulted in an increase in people that can't travel abroad because of the restrictions, coming for holidays and camping out in wild locations, backs of dunes, staying in our car parks and in laybys. And that's generated a whole range of complaints, predominantly around littering, fires, and also people obviously going to the toilet and leaving human waste in places that is inappropriate, such as in the dunes and places such as that. We have taken action where we have been able to take action on these, and this is a difficult area for us because in terms of our enforcement arrangements and abilities and the powers we have at our disposal, that it's really parking in and overnight stays in car parks that we can actively enforce under the current arrangements. So you can see from the bullet points there, we have been out where there have been problems with overnight stays in our coast, issuing penalty charge notices to those people that have been staying overnight. So this year compared to last, we issued 7 last year and 44 over the same period this year. So a significant increase, but clearly there was a lot of overnight stays occurring that we won't have got to and won't have been able to see. And as you can see from the bottom slide there, some of the issue has been almost a festival type mentality from some visitors, and not wanting to demonize people, but clearly, as you can see from that, they basically have camped out, left everything behind, including bottles and even the tents, surprisingly. And that has been, again, something that's occurred not just in Northumberland, but in other locations. What I would say is that hasn't been all bad news, that the social media sites, while some of them identified wild camping places that aren't legitimate, a lot also identify locations where people are encouraged to come. So there's a number of platforms, a number of sites now where people are encouraged to come through pub car parks and restaurant car parks and places such as that, where the business owners actually want people to come and hopefully to use their premises. So there is economic opportunity and benefit from some of this as well for us to consider. If I can now hand over to my colleague Ian, who I think is going to talk through the next couple of slides.
Thanks, Paul. Some of this on this first slide, Paul's already covered, but it was just really to say that, you know, as an AONB partnership, and for the purposes of this meeting, we couldn't invite everybody, but I have talked to the likes of the National Trust English Heritage, National Farmers Union, Countryside Land and Business Association, people working in tourism, local communities, just to get their feelings on how this summer had gone. And very similar messages, really. Obviously, farmers concerned about things like gates being left open. Don't think it's more people leaving gates open. We've just had more people in the countryside, so there's more opportunities to do that. Paul's touched on unauthorised camping, and I think in terms of litter, fires, barbecues, and stuff being left behind, I think it's all, most of the big issues are linked to unauthorised camping. Obviously, there's a general increase in the amount of litter associated with an increase in visitors, but the big problems have been around illegal and unauthorised encampments. In terms of wildlife, the birds had it quite good for a while, whilst we were all locked down, and they had pretty much the beaches to themselves in places, and they settled down and started to breed. And then obviously things opened up as lockdown was eased, and I think they got a bit of a shock. The big problem this year, obviously volume of people has been an issue, but the fact staff from the conservation agencies, Natural England, National Trust, and just no volunteers because of the lockdown issues. So they haven't been able to warden the sites with an increased number of visitors, and that's caused some problems. And we had, some real issues, particularly with shorebirds, birds that actually nest on the beach, has been an issue. And in terms of inconsiderate behaviour and parking, particularly from farmers that I've talked to, that's been an issue. Cars parked in farmers' gates, cars parked on both sides of the road, and meaning they can't get their agricultural vehicles down. So that's been a bit of a problem. Back to the encampment side, that's particularly a problem on private land. As Paul said, the council can enforce on their own land, they can't enforce on private land. So if the farmer or the National Trust have people camping in the dunes, they ask them politely to leave, they decline that request. Where do they go next? It's a civil matter if it's just a trespass, but if it's a more serious issue like criminal damage, then that does need support from the police. Next slide, please, Paul. So just to put this into a bit of a national context, this isn't a Northumberland issue alone. From Dorset to the Cairngorms, from the Cotswolds to North Norfolk, all of our colleagues across the AONB and National Park Network have reported similar issues pretty much. And there's this issue around the change in demographic of the visitors that we've had. The Lake District, and there's some information on the right-hand side of the slide, did a snap poll over the second bank holiday weekend after lockdown was eased. And 62% of their visitors, more than that in fact, wouldn't have ordinarily gone to the Lake District. But the places they would normally go were still closed. So they went to the Lake District because it was one of the few freedoms they had. And having been locked down, you can understand why they would do that. It felt safe, a safe place. It's a clean place in the open air, and they can meet up with others. That brought with it some problems. Our regular most of our visitors here are 55 plus retired people, and we know how to communicate to them and get our messages across. With this new audience, that presents more of a challenge, and we're going to have to look to see how we can communicate with people. We are talking to DEFRA. A lot of those issues on the previous slide were all about the Countryside Code. And interestingly, the visitors to the Lake District, you can see on the right-hand side, only 12.5% of those knew about the Countryside Code. So there's a big challenge for us as protected landscapes, national parks and AONBs. There's a big challenge for DEFRA and Natural England to try and communicate that code to this demographic, this new demographic, if you like. Another shocking one there, there's only 34% knew that they should take that at their home. And Paul was particularly keen on this one, that 70.3% brought alcohol, but only 40% took a picnic, which is quite a surprise. So what do we do? Communication is going to be key. I think, we're working with DEFRA, we're working with Natural England to try and do something about the Countryside Code and raise awareness of it. But I think there's room for a local campaign on the back of that as well. And I think that's something we'll be talking to the County Council's comms department about over the course of the winter. So I think that's all that I've got to say on that, Paul. Thanks.
Yeah, if we could just hand over to a colleague in tourism now, just to do the final slide.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening. I'm Nigel Walsh, I'm Head of Cultural Services within the Council. It's a large, diverse portfolio that includes the Council's Tourism Development team. And I've had the pleasure of working with a number of you in the past. So on behalf of my team, we sincerely appreciate your time this evening contributing to this. As Ian said, alongside destinations nationally, we are in relatively uncharted territory in terms of the impact of the pandemic on visitor behaviour and visitor sentiment. But it's absolutely critical that we navigate this journey together and navigate the solutions together. And we'll come back to that slightly later. But since the declaration of the pandemic, the Council, as you know, has been central to the emergency response locally, regionally and nationally. But behind the scenes, a large amount of work has been taking place to ensure that as a county, we are best placed as possible when the visitor economy re-emerges, in terms of, that means when the facilities and attractions reopen, and also best equipped to deal with that as well. This includes investment into a new digital platform, which you might say, well, it's not about attracting more visitors. But however, I must absolutely stress to you, the digital platform will have far more ability in terms of its capability of influencing visitor behaviour, both pre and during visit. We've also realigned the teams from Northumberland Tourism and Northumberland County Council to work as one unit. So hopefully as stakeholders, you're already beginning to see the benefits of that in terms of responsiveness and information and support to the businesses and residents within your areas. Thirdly, we've also secured the services of Maureen McAllister. Maureen, who you're going to hear from in a moment, is a proven industry leader who's led at a national level, including work with the RDAs and central government. So Maureen is currently overseeing the work of the two teams across Northumberland County Council and the Northumberland Tourism. Also, very importantly, is coordinating the development of a new destination management plan for the county, where we really do aim to balance resource and ambition, which will be key to a number of these issues that we've heard already this evening. So I'd just like to hand over to Maureen, if that's okay.
Good evening. I just want to go through the slides very briefly with you because you've had quite a lot of information already. But just to say that, as Nigel said, we're working on a destination management plan now. Everything that we've looked at over the summer has been about creating a county-wide tourism offer. This is based on a combination of destination, product and experience. We're trying to really focus user-generated content. You've seen on the previous slide that people are making choices based on social media, and we're encouraging imagery that reflects the widest offer of Northumberland rather than just one or two honeypot areas. We launched a visitor charter in the summer, and also all of the marketing that went out on social media and was under the banner of respect, protect and enjoy. So we were very much passing on that message that we were expecting people to respect and protect the countryside and the coastlines of Northumberland. We also worked on a Save Your Summer messaging, which again encouraged people to look at the widest offer across Northumberland and not just the coastal areas that were already overrun. We're basing everything, our promotion really emphasises the product and experience and not just specific areas as destinations. And as I said, we are really focusing those influencers and user-generated content to make sure that we're showing the widest offer that Northumberland has. We're making sure that we are collecting evidence and intelligence to focus our future activity and also to work with businesses to make sure that we can manage visitors to the local area. And through the work of the Destination Management Plan, all of the information that we're taking on board now and all of the information that we're bringing together from this, we want to be able to take this information into the Destination Management Plan so that we can effectively focus all of our work in the future, working alongside businesses and working alongside yourselves. So I would encourage anybody that is involved in this summit to work with us on the destination management plan as we go forward, particularly under the place agenda. And I'd be delighted to hear from any of you following this meeting if you would be keen to work with us. One of the key things is that we need to look at the visitors that we welcomed this year who might not ordinarily come to Northumberland and find ways that we can keep them coming, but in a way that we can manage them more effectively. As we said at the very beginning, we are looking to attract visitors that stay longer and spend more in the local economy rather than encouraging more visitors. So that's just to give a roundup of our marketing versus management activity. Thank you.
So thank you, Maureen. So, yeah. So the next session is just to have an open discussion, and I'm going to hand back to Glenn. But what I would say, just in terms of teeing that up, is that clearly we want to do this as an evidence gathering exercise. So we'll pose some key questions to yourselves as participants. Do you agree that the things that you've just seen in terms of the slides are the key issues or the key themes? More importantly, have we missed anything? Are there any specific locations or issues of concern? And also just to get a flavour from yourselves as to what you consider to be the short-term priorities for action, things that you would like collectively to happen before the next summer holiday season kicks in next year, and also some of those longer term priorities for action that will be 2 to 5 years hence. So handing back over to Glenn.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Paul. So can I just welcome those that weren't actually in right at the beginning, welcome you to this session. If I can very quickly tell you who we have here, we've got Paul representing the County Council, Ian, the AONB, Nigel and Maureen on tourism. We also have Wendy Patterson, who's the County Councillor for the Long Houghton area and Dunstern and Boomer and Newton. We have Guy Renner-Thompson, who's the member responsible for Bamborough and Sea Houses. We also have Jeff Watson, who is a cabinet member responsible for tourism and culture and so on. And also Richard Wearmouth, who is our business and tourism cabinet member as well. So, as Paul has said, and the others, this is very much a listening exercise for us. We need to be able to balance the visitors who are welcome to our county with the welfare and well-being of our residents. We have got to find a compromise. We've got to find a solution that is amenable to both. And as Paul has said, there were a number of areas this summer that highlighted the fact that actually Northumberland probably wasn't entirely ready for the amount of people we saw, but I don't think anywhere in the country was. So we just need to learn from that. And the best way to do that is to hear from you. First of all, could I ask anyone who's not actually speaking to mute their microphones, please, because there is a bit of stuff on the line. And Adam is going to do that as well. Thank you, Adam. Lovely. Okay, now this is absolutely over to you. We want to hear from you and say what you feel as bluntly as you like, and we will take all of this on board. Who's going to go first? Actually, can I just first of all say this may not be particularly easy to do because there are quite a lot on this call. So if I don't see you waving your hand, could you possibly do your electronic hand, which I might see, and if I fail to see both, then just shout. Okay, we have Jeff first. I should have said that Jeff is also the member for Warkworth and Amble and those coastal areas. Jeff.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, I've got one thing to say to Paul that I think might have been missed off the list, and then one question, really. One of the things I think we need to look at seriously is cycling and how we deal with that in our areas. I know we've done some good work recently about doing stuff in town centres and village centres with bikes, but I think we shouldn't forget that. I think that's a growing thing. And the second thing is, I'm trying to figure out how we were calculating footfall in both towns in total for tourism and also in toilets, because if you're just calculating footfall from the tickets that you sell in car parks, that would exclude places where we don't charge at all, and maybe we don't see them as big a priority as they may be. I'm thinking particularly about Amble and Warkworth. Obviously, that's my area, but we don't charge there, and I'm convinced that the sort of figures you saw for Bamborough were replicated in Amble. So that's one point to note and one question, Paul.
Okay, so Paul.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Watson. What I would say is, in terms of just the figures that are on the slides, that was really there just as an indicator to give a flavour as to what information we have, and to understand what level of footfall we did have in some of those locations. And yes, we don't have counters on the toilets. We don't have charging on some of the other coastal car parks. And that's why tonight's a really important session, because we need to get that feedback from your good selves as the representative of those areas, to give us that information, that evidence gathering approach as to where you consider the hotspot areas have been and what the issues have been from your perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Wendy Patterson.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Glenn. I would like to ask a question about dead seals, because this comes up nearly every week, especially during the summer. Who is responsible for dead seals? Because when I contact Northumberland County Council, they tell me that, oh, the beach belongs to the National Trust, and I don't know. I think National Trust were asked to attend the meeting. I don't know whether there is a representative here or not tonight, but National Trust seem not to want to take the seal away, and it comes back to the council, then it comes back again to National Trust, and we just never get a proper answer.
Who's going to take the blame for that one then? Paul?
I was hoping Ian was going to come in on that one.
Okay, Ian?
But fundamentally, it is the landowner's responsibility. So if it's a county council as the landowner, it would be ours. If it's the National Trust or any other body, it would be them. What I would say is, in terms of the National Trust, Ian's here to represent them because they are part of the AONB partnership, and Ian's representing the whole of that partnership this evening.
Ian, do you want to add something?
Paul's pretty much covered it. In terms of whether the National Trust then do clear up a dead seal, it's entirely up to them, unless I think my understanding of the legislation, unless it is a hazard to human health, deemed a hazard to human health. Now, who would deem it then a hazard to human health? I don't know. I guess our Environmental Health Department. Otherwise, it's their call, really. If they want to leave the thing to decay on the beach, then that's the National Trust's call, in the same way it would be for a farmer or landowner. We are looking to work with Paul's department to pull together a kind of seal policy on what happens to dead seals. We'll have that in place for next year, based on the popularity of the beach, the time of the year, and whether it's a beach or a rocky shore. If it's a rocky shore out on the far end of Holy Island, and there's no access as well. Access is a big thing. Obviously, that one at Dunstan, it's difficult to access the beach with a vehicle. So, you have to counter that as well.
Thank you very much. I think we've got Margaret. I'll come to you in a second, Alison. I think we've got Margaret and Adam from Craster. Am I right? Margaret, your thoughts about, or Adam, your thoughts about this season. What can we do better? Sorry, can you just unmute yourself?
Margaret, do you want to go? Or yeah, I'll say something. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Good. I'd like to be heard. A few points, really. First of all, I'd just like to say a huge thank you on behalf of Craster Parish Council to Northumberland County Council. I noticed during the first national lockdown that the government minister actually explicitly mentioned Northumberland as one of the top local authorities in the country for getting out financial support to businesses in the local area. So I think that's incredible. And also a big thank you to Wendy Patterson as well. I think Wendy's quite unique as a county councillor in that she's got 9 parishes in her one ward, and I know she's been dotting to and from each one, and she's been really fantastic. So a big thank you and a big thumbs up from us here in Craster for that. I think it's already been mentioned, but parking is a massive issue in Craster. So much so that we've actually carried out a consultation in conjunction with the Highways Department at Northumberland County Council to try and introduce a resident-only parking scheme. We have been absolutely inundated as the lockdown restrictions were lifted, and I think really residents are getting to the end of their tether, and that was reflected in the results that we had from the consultation that we had on the parking scheme, where a very high majority of residents actually voted in favour of that. So we're looking forward to see how that actually has an impact in Craster. We, as I say, are going to set about introducing this scheme, but a lot of the feedback that I've had from local residents is that they feel that there's not enough enforcement for displaced and inconsiderate parking. I know a lot of residents who are very keen on being actually volunteer enforcement officers, and I wondered if that was something that the county council had ever considered. So that's one point. And the second point is we are going through a neighbourhood plan process at the moment in Craster, and what's become clear from the census data that we have is that over half of our village now is made up of holiday lets or second homes, some of whom may not actually be paying a precept towards the parish council. Now, at the same time that we are inundated with tourists, the parish council year in, year out is finding it more and more difficult to actually raise a precept from the, as I say, less and less residents that we have in the village. And I wonder whether or not the county council had actually considered giving some further financial support to communities like Craster and Dunstan, who, as I say, the parish council are charged with making sure that we have bins, that we look after our open green spaces, toilets, and those sort of services which are essential for tourism to happen. And, you know, there's very much a feeling growing in Craster that residents are subsidising what we want to be a very successful tourism economy, and we do want to see that, but we also want to see some support for our local communities in North Northumberland too. And that's everything from me. I don't know if, Margaret, you want to add anything?
Yes, I will, please. We have an overflow car park in Craster, which was, it's limited time, but it was very, very full on most days, plus the fact that we have problems with people parking along our Bogue Road, which I know the county are about to address, and in the village. So your slide earlier on would actually be only on the county council's car park, and we had a lot more visitors than that who wouldn't have been counted on your slide.
Okay, thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Adam. Adam, thank you for the kind words at the beginning. It is interesting, actually, that I was in Craster last week, and just how many houses there are actually holiday homes now. They're not with residents like it used to be 20 years ago. So two particular points there, if I may. Paul, I'm going to pass them both to you. The first one was around volunteer enforcement officers because of the problems with poor parking in Craster. And secondly, something you and I talked about when I first started this, about what we call hypothecation, that where there should be specific help for coastal towns like Craster, where we might be able to look at greater money going to their to help them with their own local economy. So can I ask you to mute if you're not speaking? And Paul, I'll pass over to you for those two questions.
Thanks. In terms of the enforcement issue, obviously the more parking restrictions we put in place, the more demand there then is in terms of our enforcement capacity to be able to address that. So that is something as we're going forward we'll be revisiting. Certainly we have had our enforcement staff out and about right through the summer period. We have had some issues in terms of, as you would expect during a pandemic, with some staff that have had to be shielding. That has had an impact on our ability to have a full complement of staff. But certainly that is something that we'll have an eye on going forward. In terms of the volunteer enforcement aspect, that is something that I wouldn't be keen on, primarily because enforcement by its very nature can be confrontational. That our staff have body-worn cameras, they go through quite a detailed training programme to protect both their health and safety, and also in terms of the standard of service that we offer to the public in terms of, you know, undertaking that enforcement activity and knowing the detailed legislation that they're working to. So that's something that we wouldn't be keen on pursuing, but I can understand why that was raised. In terms of the issue around hypothecation, there has been discussion previously around effectively hypothecating some income from car parks. I think the issue we have with that is that then just relies on you have to have a car park to get any benefit. And I think the wider issue is what's the provision of services that impact on tourism within the area. So public toilets predominantly in the area are and remain a county council function. So clearly the provision of those public toilets is something that is part of our core funding arrangement and core service provision. Litter bins are more problematic in that under the town and parish charter, the provision of litter bins is something that falls to the responsibility of the town and parish, with the county council emptying those. I think that is something that if we continue with the level of impact along the coast, we have placed out additional wheel bins, for example, to help cope with that over the summer. But that is something going forward we'll take on board and have some further dialogue over.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on. I'm going to take Alison first, and then perhaps you can, and then Colin, and then perhaps you can look more at the question about what can we do. This is a very crude term, but to spread the visitors around. Is there anything that we can do? Do you think we need to do that, and would that be a good idea? Alison first from Beadnell. Alison.
Yes, just going back to dead seals. I'm sorry, I got lost there. I have in the back of my mind that between high and low tide is usually Crown land. And I have no knowledge of dead seals, but wouldn't they normally end up on Crown land that might actually be the reason why no one has come forward to deal with it? I don't know, that I'm just putting it out there. I believe that's the case. Yes, I'm very interested in Adam's comment about Craster and extra help needed. So that was very welcome to hear that you're contemplating that. There are some very practical ways. We have felt with, before COVID, the increase in the number of visitors, that we should keep toilets, the public toilets, open over winter. And an immediate way, rather than looking ways to offer us funding, would be, for example, not to bill us for winter opening. I'm just put out there as a sort of a very practical way to help us in the immediate future. That would be a way to do it.
Okay. Thank you, Alison. We'll come back to that one. Colin Wakeling, Northumberland. Hello, Colin.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that Glenn raised the issue of looking after residents as well, because I think it is a matter of ensuring without the residents, you don't have an area. So it's a matter of marrying the two. But I think the parking issue is long-standing. If you look at it, Arriva buses along the coast, the X18 and the Travelshore service, the 418, no longer serve, for instance, what I would call the centre of sea houses, largely because of issues with long-standing issues with irresponsible parking on both sides of the main street. You have the same issue at High Newton, where again, only the Travelshore bus, because it's smaller, gets into High Newton. And this kind of thing actually deters people using public transport, because in the case of sea houses, you're dumped a distance from the centre, there isn't a bus shelter, there's nowhere to shelter particularly, and it deters people from using it. Within Northumberland Island Shire, there has been a problem this summer over parking by the entrance to the causeway on the landward side, particularly when the tide's in, but not always then. It's not helped by the fact that there is an ongoing dispute between Natural England and the local landowner, which means that the wee car park that was there is no longer in use. Now, it seems to us, I think, that in the short term, it would be highly sensible to introduce parking restrictions and also to ensure that there is enforcement of those parking restrictions. Because at the moment, for instance, parking on both sides of the road makes it hazardous for the Holy Island bus service to get through. It also makes it difficult for people to stop and look at the tide tables. And above all else, we want people to know what the tides are going to be if they're going to go onto Holy Island. Equally, there are issues relating there to an ice cream van. Should it be trading there? Is it allowed to? And if you have a car park open there, would it end up by being a trading hotspot potentially, or would you equally get overnight camping? It's an ideal place, I suppose, if you want a nice view to dump your van there and then dump your litter afterwards. So I think in the first stage, it's probably important to make sure that the regulations or the restrictions are introduced. Now, that doesn't require, I would suggest, a great deal of investment on the part of the county. It does require a refocusing sometimes of the manpower to ensure that that takes place. It also is, I think in the long term, as I say, then getting car parks like that sorted and regulations about overnight stays and camping would be extremely important. And make sure as well that, that the problem created there doesn't get shifted up the road if you paint yellow lines on one stretch, and that's also obviously something you work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the Colin. I know we've had problems at the causeway there. I'm sure Ian's been involved in that, but it is something we'll come back to. I want to just ask Sharon Wilmore-Greaves, who's joined us from Northumberland Police. Sharon, is there anything you'd like to say at this stage?
Oh, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm sorry for being a bit late. Childcare commitments, unfortunately. Certainly from my experience, the coastline presented the most challenge for my team, and they were kept very busy from Warkworth all the way up to Newton by the Sea. Residents within some of the small villages, Newton by the Sea, Craster, Boomer, and some elements of Warkworth complained of overflowing car parks, so that vehicles were then parking on the road, which displayed some double yellow lines, but also roads where there were no road restrictions, but were parked on the pavement, because the roads were so narrow that if they didn't park on the pavement, it wouldn't then allow for either emergency vehicles or buses to get past. And consequently, because there were in lockdown 1, people were frightened that even close distance of cars parked on the pavement, even though the elderly were in their homes, they felt that the influx of tourism into their small villages was too close for comfort. So consequently, there was the fear factor and there was the complaints. From a police perspective, we were quite frustrated because we were sympathetic to the residents' needs, in that, yes, we could enforce vehicles for obstruction and willful obstruction, but where there were no parking restrictions, we were a bit stuck as to what we could do, other than advise people to move. But where could they move to? Because the car parks were already full. So there was a lot of encouragement and explaining, but our hands were somewhat tied. The other pinch point for us, which has been championed by a resident down at Dunstan, that's it. You hit the nail on the head. Thank you very much. And I do sympathise with Mrs. Cornell there, in that you've got a track road which goes down to the dunes, which is owned by the council, but then moves on to National Trust land. But there's no parking restrictions, and people are very enthusiastic to go and visit the beautiful rugged coastline and see Dunstanburgh Castle. And there's absolutely no way at all that people are going to be distracted from going to visit that location, because it's even been publicised as one of the hidden beauties of Northumberland in the top 10 locations. So blocking the area off, which was one recommendation which was put to the police, wasn't an option, because what it would do is displace the tourist traffic back further up into the village in Dunstan.
Sharon, can I just say it's Dunstan Summits?
Yes. Yeah. So eventually there was some working with the council, and we had cones were put out so that there was a small turning circle at the bottom so vehicles could park. But going forward, there needs to be some sort of plan put in place for parking at that location, so that it doesn't displace further into the village, but also doesn't cause the volume of calls from the residents to the police and the National Trust and the council, where actually we're straddling a knife's edge because our powers are so limited there. So those are our main pinch points: Dunstansteads and Boomer. The Bilton Barnes location's been closed off by Northumberland Estates. So all the complaints we had there for parking with camper vans has ceased because they can't get down there anymore. So the complaints of parking and illegal parking and campfires, etc., has gone. So going forward, I see come spring and summer, the main areas will again be Dunstansteads and Boomer. But Craster have been sensible, and they've opened farmland, which has been a temporary car parking measure for overflow, which has been very sensible. And that was recommended to Dunstan, but wasn't taken up.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed for that.
Sanderson, can I get in?
Yes, Terence Howells. Where do you come from, sir?
Embleton.
Embleton, right.
Yes.
Over to you.
We're one of the missing people who nobody remembers because we have no car parks and we have no toilets. We have a double problem. We have Dunstansteads, which I think has been well covered, but we have Sea Lane, which leads down to the golf club, Dunstan and Castle Golf Club. It's a narrow road. It's parked on both sides. It's impossible to get up and down with a car when you're parked on both sides. It's even worse if you've got an emergency vehicle. You can't get an ambulance down. You can't get a fire engine down to the golf course at all. I don't know what the solution is. Obviously, we could paint yellow lines, or you could, but that just drives everybody back up into the village. When you close the car parks in Craster, it just got worse and worse in Embleton. I don't know what the answer is, but please, we don't appear very often because we don't have a car park and we don't have toilets, and so people talk about Newton and they talk about Craster. But Embleton, we certainly had our 85% increase this year. Please don't forget us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howells. Right, anyone else with specific issues? I'll come to you in a second, Jeff. Can I just see if anyone else has any specific issues around their own particular villages? If not, I want you to tell us what we do about managing tourists. So are there any specific other issues that anyone would like to raise now?
Sorry, Sharon Wilmore-Greaves, could I just also raise rural Northumberland, particularly around Simonside and going up towards Ingram Valley, the Breamish Valley area. We also had a high influx of tourism along that area too. And whilst the car parks are full, members of the public then parked on the side of the road. No, there are no parking restrictions, but that also impacted on nature and wildlife, where in some areas had a conservation area put in place as well. So, and not to forget the west of sort of Alnwick as well, where we had high influx, and people were bringing their barbecues, and we also had at the beginning a couple of wildfires which were set off by discarded throwaway barbecues. So from a fire perspective, we nearly lost one particular forest, which then went on to another one, and that would have been absolutely horrific, because there's also the danger aspect to other walkers in that area too. So
thank you.
Cognizance there.
Super. Okay. Thank you very much for all of that.
Glenn?
Yes, please.
Glenn, Adrian Inchcliffe, can I come in, please?
Hello, Adrian. Yes.
Hello. I've heard so much about Boomer in the last 10 minutes that living there, I thought I should come in and say a few words.
Good.
As the county council officials and Glenn know, we're desperate for more off-street car parking in Boomer, and coupled with that, parking restrictions. But I'd just like to come back to one of the themes that was mentioned earlier. We have a honeypot car park here, and we need to charge. It's key to charging. We recently asked residents if they would consider a scheme like a parking restriction scheme like Craster, and some of them said, well, why should I have to pay for my own bay when there's people are crossing the car park getting it free and forcing me to have a bay? And that's quite right. So we've got to get the balance between charging and parking restrictions right. Can I move on?
Yes, please.
I'd like to pick up on one or two things that have been said. Jeff Watson started out by talking about green routes, and I think we've got one major green route which runs up the coast. We ought to be developing more circular routes and encouraging both residents and visitors to use bikes and more walking. At the moment, Long Outton Parish Council, we're working together with Lesbury Parish Council to see if we can develop routes circular from the two villages to Alnwick and things like that. And I think we need more encouragement and more support to do that. New people coming to the AONB. This is wonderful. New people coming to the AONB, it's wonderful. The problem is they haven't got the right culture. We need to educate them. How are we going to do it? You know, I agree with things like the Visitors Charter and the Countryside Code, but we've got to use other mechanisms. We need more interpretation as to what the special qualities mean. So we haven't got those at the moment. We've only got them in a few places. People come here to Boomer. It's in the AONB and it's a special area, particularly for birds, but there's nothing to tell them about that. So we ought to be considering that. And if they understood that we've got rare birds on the foreshore here, they may have a different attitude to what they do on the beach. So I think it's very important, and maybe we should be using social media as well. I also think that places like Craster and Boomer, we've got a maximum number of vehicles that we can accept at any one time, because over and above that, it's chaos. The roads is too narrow. So we ought to have some sort of mechanism, as they've got in Newcastle City, where we can say when Boomer is full or when Craster is full and deter people from coming here because they know that they're not going to be able to park. Now, modern day technology should be able to do that. I don't know that you're working on that sort of a facility, but we ought to be looking at it. So I think there are things that we can do to ease the problems of the number of vehicles coming to our place, to our seaside towns, but we've got to think strategically about how we're going to achieve this. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Adrian. That's really helpful. Right. Anyone else? This is your chance, please, to have your say.
Can I come in again?
Yes, Margaret.
This might be controversial, but the National Trust own a lot of land around Craster. They have a facility, i.e. Dunstanburgh Castle, which they run with the English heritage, which is very attractive to everyone. And they don't do anything to help us park cars. We've tried and tried and tried to get them interested in talking to us and perhaps allowing us to have an extra parking facility. I don't know whether the county can do anything with this. I think they have tried in the past, but we would like to think that they were helping us with the situation that they are partially creating.
Thanks, Margaret. Where would such a car park be in Craster?
There lies a question.
I thought
it would be up to the National Trust. They do own quite a lot of land. They own all the land, which is currently leased out to farmers as well. But they own the land at the back, at the back of the village. Right. Certainly the whole strip right up to Dunstanburgh and beyond. There would be room for perhaps some sort of negotiation with them. But we do think that if these numbers of visitors are going to continue, we do need to address it a little more. Our car park that's an overflow only has 28 days when it can be open. So if it will do some of it, but we need something else as well.
Okay. So let me ask everyone this. If we think that this is something that's going to remain, this demand to come to our county, which we obviously welcome visitors, if that's going to stay and it's not just a one-off for this year, what can we do? I mean, can we all of us together do something around signposting visitors to different parts of the county, or do you think they'll always still want to come to the coastline? Jeff Watson.
Yeah, I've been waiting to come in. I want to say a couple of things, and I think your last point is very, very good, but I'll cover one or two more. Just to put to bed a fear that a lot of people have. Somebody's got the mics on. There's an awful feedback coming through. There's an awful fear that visitors.
Sorry, just would you, Margaret? Would you mind just muting yourself, please?
There's an awful fear that visitors spread COVID. Glenn can witness the fact that I asked our public health inspector at Cabinet on Tuesday, is there any link that's been proved between visitors and the spread of COVID? And the answer is no. There is less likely to be a spread of COVID from visitors than there is from anything else. That's one point. We can talk about individual problems to individual parishes up and down the coast of Northumberland. And I'm sure if we asked every parish, they'd all come up with a different solution or a different idea. What we need is an overall strategy. If I can just tell you that what the police lady was telling us about, Sharon was telling us about, Bilton Barnes. When you close Bilton Barnes, what happened, do you think, to the camper vans and things who were going to Bilton Barnes? They went a mile south to Warkworth and parked illegally there. What we've got to do is sort out a strategy. And what I want the council to do, and I've been saying this as well, is that we need to facilitate overnight parking of camper vans, not ban them and send them somewhere else, because they will go somewhere else and they'll keep going somewhere else and keep causing trouble until we've got a facility for them. These are not nasty people. These are tourists who are, in most cases, are nice people. We just have to have a strategy that accommodates them. And I hope that's what we'll be able to get out of this meeting today, Glenn.
Thanks, Jeff. Can I bring in Guy Renner-Thompson, please? Guy.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, Jeff is completely right about an overall strategy. And the question is how we do it. I mean, the parking has been touched on. Adrian's idea about telling people when the car parks are full, I think is a good idea, and also being more proactive with local landowners. I mean, you know, we've been trying to do something in Bamborough for some time, but if it was actual council policy to be a bit more proactive, find out who landowners are, search out the best locations and see what we can do with them, I think that would help. But going back to your question about spreading tourists around the county, I think that's vitally important. I mean, I have this discussion with Ian all the time about this hidden burden of tourism. So if we were to build more car parks in Bamborough, it's what everyone wants, seems like a good idea, then what would happen? Every shop and cafe on Bamborough Main Street would have a queue half a mile long because the village would have 3 times as many people in. And then the people that are coming would have a less of a tourist experience, they wouldn't like it, and they wouldn't come back. So I think moving those people around the county is vital. What Nigel is doing with this sort of portal where you can see everywhere to go should have a lot to do with it. But I mean, a lot of the big tourism strategies that we have, when you come off, especially when you got off the plane at Newcastle Airport, what is there? There's a picture of Bamborough Castle, Holy Island, Dunstanburgh Castle. And I think we just need to move that around, pictures of the Cheviot Hills, pictures of Addiston Castle, pictures of Fordenetal Estates, things like that. And then a lot of what we've talked about is sort of issues in the short term, but there is a bigger issue with tourism around house prices, around our young people can't afford to stay in our villages. And then what that happens is the pubs and restaurants can't find any staff. So in sea houses, for example, the pubs, and certainly one of the pubs and two of the restaurants, bustle their staff up from Newcastle because there aren't enough local people to do those jobs. So we really need to do a bit of work looking at the long-term impact of tourism, and some work about developing our other industries that we have. I mean, the industrial estate and sea houses is ripe for expansion. People want to expand. Maybe there's some work we can do there. And I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. The Lake District, Cornwall, Devon, the Isle of Skye have all been through this. And everyone says to me, you know, we're coming to the party late. Can't we just look at Cornwall, see what mistakes they've made, and then not to do that? Which seems to be the easiest way of doing it. So maybe we need some sort of task force to look at other tourism areas in the country and what lessons we can learn from there.
Yep, thank you very much, Guy. Anybody else? Can I have Colin again, and then Adrian, and then Adam, in that order, if I can remember. Try and keep it brief, because we are running towards the end now.
I think Adrian's point, Glenn, about the idea of circular footpaths, circular cycleways, this kind of thing, would enable people to get away from doing the kind of mundane basic things. It would also be very good if some of the people then in the holiday homes could know about these, and they would actually start moving out of, if you like, a comfort zone. The trouble is, at the moment, you've got an awful lot of lazy journalism out there. And for instance, the Sunday glossies have been full of things. 10 best beaches in Britain. Well, you stick on Bamborough, that's fairly safe. 10 best tourist spots, Bamborough goes in again, and so on and so forth. And probably our tourist people need to be planting stories, because the way journalism goes these days, quite frankly, they'll take more or less anything you care to give them, as long as it doesn't cost too much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then it was Adrian, and then it's Adam. Adrian.
Thank you. Just coming on 3 points there. Jeff says there's no strategies in place. I fully agree with that. You know, we as parish councils up and down the coast, apart from attending AONB meetings, we don't talk about, particularly with the county council, about strategies to deal with these sort of problems that we're now faced with. And we ought to be talking more and looking at options and things like that. So I agree with that. Secondly, camper van sites. I fully agree. Here at Bloomer, just 100 metres from where I am now, we get camper vans coming throughout the summer. I go across and chat to them and tell them where they can go, give them a list of sites. A lot of them don't know where the sites are. Some don't want to go on sites, but we ought to be more proactive in encouraging them to go to sites, and I think possibly we need more sites away from the coast. Finally, I'd just like to raise a point about vehicles coming to the coast with cycles on, parking in the car parks and then going off cycling, which nothing wrong with that. But if we provided car parks away from the coast, where people with cars and bikes on top can actually park and cycle from, then it would take a proportion of the parking traffic that comes into places like Boomer. I mean, I see them arriving with the bikes on the top of the cars, they get them off, and then they go cycling, which is nothing wrong with that. But if we provided more car parks for people with bikes on away from the coast, it would help. Only a little bit, but it would help. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Just a really quick point, and I think it picks up on something that Jeff mentioned and also what Adrian's just mentioned there, because I know Councillor Rana Thompson and Councillor Patterson have been had received some correspondence from a resident in Craster about this. I think it's very positive to hear that the county council are actually going to launch some comms around this, but actually one thing that I would hope was included in some of the comms is to have some kind of a harmony between residents and tourists, there's a lady in our parish, for example, who owns a van, and she's feeling that there's a real hostility towards van owners. And I think Adrian's just highlighted the point there that, you know, not all of them, you know, it doesn't need to be hostile. We're a welcoming county. You know, a lot of van owners they actually come and live in Northumberland because they want to go out and surf with their family at dawn and dusk. And I hope that we can have a really positive comms around that and make sure that there's some harmony between residents and tourists, because we do want to have a really big and successful tourism economy here in Northumberland. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Sharon, we're running very short of time now, so if you keep the comments brief, that'd be great. Sharon.
There's a Facebook page in Scotland called Scotland Wild Camping, which has allocated and specified locations for camper vans to wild camp. So rather than having them on the coastline, identifying locations where these camper vans could go and advertise them on Facebook could be a positive way of dealing with them.
Super. Thank you very much for that.
And just say, Glenn, that there is a wild camping website for UK as well, and it actually features a walk with car park. Isn't that lovely?
Okay, that's lovely. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, if I may, is I'm just going to ask Paul or Ian or Nigel or Maureen to just, if they have any final comments to make, then I'm going to do a sum up what I think where we've got to. Anything else from any of you?
Glenn, may I raise a point, please?
Yes, please. Nigel.
Thank you, Glenn. It's just really to, in addition to, I believe it was Colin that raised these points, it's just to really have an awareness of the amount of influencers that are out there, and I'm sure Maureen will testify to this. As a county council in Northumberland Tourism, we don't have a large tourism budget, so we're not relentlessly pushing the council and pushing the county as a destination. And also just some reassurance, during the summer, it was absolutely recognised that the issues that local communities were facing, and there was absolutely a drive within Northumberland Tourism and the council to actually limit exposure of those. But what we are up against is, as Colin did say, so much user-generated content. If you to look at TripAdvisor now, as of tonight, the Farns are #2 attraction in Northumberland, and that's totally user-generated. AONB's in there at #8. So it's just having that awareness, and also coming back to businesses as well. As I think it was Adrian mentioned, obviously tourism is a significant sector, and it will become more significant in terms of its percentage of our economy. Over 13,000 people employed in tourism, valuable jobs, local businesses. So it's getting that balance, and it's also recognising that these businesses will push out publicity and promotion as well. So I think, Maureen, I'm going to invite you just to come in briefly, just to probably say a little bit about that, because I know we've spoken about this in terms of our sphere of influence and what we can actually do. Yeah, so we're obviously doing all the things that we can do to make sure that we are showing the widest variety of experiences. We are working with the stories that aren't the known top 10s. We're sending out the unknown and the new experiences, but we're also encouraging those people that are creating content to create different content, so around cycling and walking and all the things that you've talked about. I think the really important thing is I'd love to hear from anybody that's on this call today to work with us on the destination management plan. Everything that you've said, everything that's been raised today is such valuable information, and how we work together in a strategic way through the destination management plan will be absolutely essential. So I would welcome having one of these calls with you guys on a regular basis, so that we can actually look at Northumberland as a whole and not just try and look at picking off one element or the other, because we've got to get it right. As you said, if you make a change in one area, it will just shift the problem somewhere else, and we've got to make sure that we look at these opportunities that we're presented with, but we look at it as a whole. So hopefully I will hear from you all, and we'll be able to start to work with you as we put the destination management plan together, and also how we can work quite quickly on areas too.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Paul or Ian, final last words? Or are you okay?
No, it was just obviously just in terms of the parking and the camper van issues. Parking, we would certainly hope that the level of visitor numbers in terms of the COVID pandemic, you would expect that when other places are opened up, people can go further afield, that we wouldn't get the same input, but we clearly do want to continue to encourage tourism into Northumberland. And it is that whole issue about it being sustainable tourism, and that's the whole purpose of a destination management plan, to try and address that. Because yes, we can work with landowners, we can look at seasonal parking provision, but fundamentally we don't want to tarmac over what's beautiful and lose what we've got. So it is just striking that appropriate balance, and camper vans are a key part of that. We are looking at, and already have planning consent to take forward camper van parking provision at Druidge Bay Country Park, for example, and we would expect other landowners to see the commercial benefits in this as well. So you have to strike the right balance.
Thank you very much. Ian?
Just to follow on Paul's comment there about motor caravans and camper vans, I've just written a guide and principles document on how we can manage that issue in the AONB without having an impact on the AONB. I'll share that with the AONB partnership meeting next week, and then hopefully we'll be able to share that with Maureen and Nigel and Paul and the team at County Hall as well. And just touch on what Maureen said about meeting more regularly. There's still a vacancy on the AONB partnership for Northumberland Tourism, Maureen. So if you want to join in virtually to represent Northumberland tourism there, that would be splendid.
Super.
And the only other one was just a quick question for Sharon, and this is something specifically asked by farmers, and I think I mentioned it before you arrived in the meeting, Sharon, and this was about fly camping and farmers feeling that they were unsupported, and the National Trust as well as a private landowner in dealing with fly campers. Obviously it's not a criminal offence, I think it's a civil offence because it's trespass. Then if they have a fire and they're burning the grass, it becomes a criminal offence. But then they're told it's a Category 5 offence. We haven't got the resources to come out and deal with a Category 5 offence on a Saturday night in Druidge Bay or Dunstan or wherever else it might be. And I just wonder what we can take back to the NFU and the CLA on that.
Maybe you might want to just think that one through and maybe talk to Ian about that, Sharon, because it's quite a complex area, isn't it?
It is rather complex, and there's a lot of policy and procedure in the background before I can actually answer it. So, Ian, if you want to email me, if you've got or I can email you, or give me your telephone number, I'll give you a call and we can discuss it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Sharon.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. I'm just going to do a quick summarize, if I may, and tell me at the end if I've forgotten anything. We've talked about the importance of enforcement and where we can come in there. Adrian mentioned the good idea of highlighting car parks which might be full. We're all keen on the idea of increasing cycling routes, and that is something that the County Council is working on hard at the moment, actually. We've heard about the impact, particularly on those really small villages that don't have loos, that don't have car parks, and Embleton has been highlighted as one, and of course the Boomer and others as well, that have been that we need to look at particularly. National Trust and other landowners who are actually important in all of this, because they may own the land where we could have some seasonal car park, and we're not talking about multi-storey car parks. But we could look at some more car parking facilities, and we are actually talking with Wendy with a number of options around the Longhoughton area on that. Facilitate camper van overnight parking is a very important point. And I think also the need to work up this tourism strategy that we will that our staff are working on. Actually, I just want to say thank you very much to Nigel and his tourism team, to Paul, to Ian, for all the work that everyone's done, and particularly the frontline staff who have been to empty the bins and have been, on call throughout COVID time, throughout the summer, to help keep things tidy. I think the one thing that for me, I would love to be able to try and find a resolution about is how we can meet up again, perhaps just to have perhaps a rerun of this, because there are people from Berwick all the way down to Druidge Bay and beyond, and I'd like them to have a say as well. So I'm going to talk to Paul to see if we might look potentially having to reconvene this and just have a catch up, maybe after Christmas in January sometime, just see how far we've gone, and what we might have missed and what you think we need to add to that. I'd really welcome Sharon if you're able to come back again to join that. That would be super. So can we sort of provisionally say let's look at another get together like this after Christmas, if that's okay? And thank you all very much for attending tonight. I hope it's been valuable. It's a huge subject, very complex, but thank you to everybody who's working on it. So,
thank you very much, Glenn. Can I just thank you on behalf of everyone? Thank you.
Well, if it wasn't for you, Wendy, this wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much.
Glenn, yeah, and well done, Wendy. Can I just say, Paul Jones has done a fabulous presentation tonight. Can we be sent a copy of that, please?
Good. Yeah, Paul, could you do that, please?
Thank you.
Glenn, can I give some instructions for our parish chairs meeting? Just it's going to follow straight on from this.
Right. So I'm now going to say goodbye to everybody and thank you to everybody that's joined this meeting. And I will talk to Paul about meeting up again. And thank you again. Bye-bye.
And anybody else who's coming to the parish chairs meeting will just stay